What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Inside D3 show that gives you an inside look at Division III's finest student athletes, coaches, faculty, and staff. I'm your host, Morgan Cheatham. Thank you guys again for joining us, whether it's your first time or your 100th time. We appreciate it nonetheless. Be sure to follow us on our website at InsideD3.com. You can check out our latest story on some of the Division III athletes that have recently signed NFL contracts. It's written by my guy Sam, so definitely be sure to check that out. Follow us on all of our social media platforms. Our Twitter and Instagram are at D3Inside. Our Facebook is Inside D3. Our YouTube is Inside D3 Athletics. And you can watch all of our videos on there as they drop. If you don't want to see my pretty face every week, you can check out our podcast on iTunes, Anchor, and Spotify. All of our episodes will be out on there as well, so you can listen to them whenever you like. So, without further ado, let's get to it. So today we're joined by Jennifer Baker. She is the Director of Athletics and Recreation at Johns Hopkins University of the Cenntenial Conference and the Big Ten Conference. So Jen, first off, thank you for joining us. And second, how are you today?
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I am doing well. It is Friday. The sun is out. We're going to cross 80 degrees today. So
finally,
yeah, if you got to be stuck at home, we have something to look forward to when the workday ends. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to start right off with, just your journey into the present. So tell me a little bit about, your previous education, what college you went to, your work experience, and then if you have any playing or coaching experience, you can share that with us as well.
Sure. So my background, I would say, is somewhat atypical for somebody who's in a role similar to mine. I basket. So really wasn't sure what lied on the backside of that. But I will say, while I was in the Navy, towards the end of my time there, I really missed lacrosse. And so when I finally was transferred to an area where lacrosse existed, because it tends to be a regional sport, I drove by a high school that had goals outside, and I was super excited about that and immediately contacted the AD and asked if he needed any help. And my hope was that I would just get to come to practice on occasion and sort of shag balls. And instead, he offered me the opportunity to be the assistant coach there. And so I started as assistant coach and then wound up head coaching a high school team for a number of years. And I loved it. I absolutely loved coaching. So I get out of the Navy. I was still coaching. It was important to me that I continue to be able to coaching. I owned a business for a couple of years. And then I ultimately wound up teaching math at the school where I was coaching and certainly enjoyed that experience. But I'd always wanted to go to grad school. And so when I had the opportunity to go to grad school, I said goodbye to my team. I moved to Cornell. I did 2 grad degrees at Cornell, and I thought I was done with sports when I showed up there. And when I showed up my first semester, I met the women's lacrosse staff while I was there, and they asked me to be their volunteer assistant coach, which was, like, in my mind, an absolute no-brainer. Why wouldn't I do that? That would be amazing. And so had a great opportunity to spend 3 years with the women's lacrosse team there, coaching in a volunteer capacity while I was working on my grad degrees. And it was through that experience that I really realized, I went to school thinking I was going to go into a tech field. And I quickly realized how truly passionate I was about the relationship build with college-age students and help them leverage their participation in sport as a real tool for personal development. And so it became pretty clear to me that I really wanted to work in sport at that point. I just had no idea how I was going to do it. And I had built like a leadership development curriculum for our women's lacrosse team while I was on that staff. And I'd accepted a job in commercial consulting. I was going to be headed down to Washington, D.C. And as I was getting ready to leave campus, I thought, why does this leadership program not exist for the rest of this department? Why is it just for this team? I'm going to pitch the AD the idea that he hire me to build this program for the entire department, fully expecting him to say no. And I was really philosophically okay with that, because if I'm being totally candid, my goal in that meeting was simply to make a connection with him so that when I knew at some point I would really want to pivot and get into sport, I would have somebody I could call who maybe would introduce me to some people. And to my surprise, he said yes in that meeting. And so for me, that was the writing on the wall, and I really haven't looked back. So knew pretty clearly early on that I wanted to become an athletic director, started by building the leadership program up there in year one, which then turned into successive responsibility, and then had the opportunity to land at Johns Hopkins a couple years ago. Again, never expecting that I would wind up the athletic director at Hopkins. I actually, part of why I took that job was to work for the former athletic director, because I knew I could learn so much from her and I respected her so much. And so surprise, surprise, you never can predict what's coming ahead. But here I am a couple years later, and now I'm actually in the chair at Hopkins. And for me, this feels very much like the Navy did. Different kind of missions, but same kind of camaraderie, same kind of people, same kind of sort of environment and culture when you come into work. And it's definitely something that I'm on the right path. I'm not going anywhere else.
That's awesome. So I know, you've been in this athletic director position only for a short time so far, but, what is that role like so far? And, do you have any other roles on campus as well?
I don't have other roles on campus. This is definitely a full-time job.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah.
I mean, I certainly, so I participate across campus, obviously, in a number of different things, and certainly on my boss, who was the athletic director, is now the vice provost for student affairs. So I serve on her senior leadership team as a unit head within her division. But the first year has been an interesting one. So this was an interesting time to come into this responsibility for sure. So in the fall, it was fantastic. As you know, and the beauty is I was already on staff. So I already knew our coaches, I knew our student athletes, I knew Hopkins, which made it so much easier for me to transition into this role for the first time, I think, than it might had I been in a different campus. But, two of our teams won national championships in the fall, got on the same day, got to be in literally two different places nearly simultaneously to see that. It was unbelievable. And then sort of shortly thereafter, as we headed into winter, then the COVID situation started to manifest. And I feel like we've been on sort of a treadmill ever since with that. So I love what I do. And I feel like so much of what I do now is very similar to what I was doing with my previous role on staff, just in terms of the way I try to support coaches and student athletes. But there's definitely an elevated level of responsibility, particularly in the current climate. Where we're all sort of trying to figure out what comes next and what else we need to be doing, and information changes daily. So honestly, in these moments, I feel like there's nothing that prepared me better for this than the time I spent serving in the military, because this is what folks on the front lines, at least in the military, deal with every day. So I'm grateful for having that as a proving ground.
Yeah, for sure. So, Hopkins is one of those few schools that is a part of, two separate divisions, obviously with the men's and women's lacrosse team being a Division I school and, some of the other teams being Division III. So what is it like managing two separate, divisions, with sports like that?
It's interesting. I get asked this question a lot. And for me, it's somewhat, I don't really notice it. Like, it's not something that really defines who we are. I think from the outside looking in, obviously, there's a very tangible difference between competing in the Big Ten, at the Division I level in two sports, and then competing in Division III for our remainder. But my focus has always been from the outset to create a Hopkins experience for our student athletes, regardless of what division they're in. I want the experience to feel as similar as possible. And there are certainly compliance constraints. There are things you can do in D1 that you can't do in D3. So obviously the experience will be different in some areas, but where I have leverage and where it is not necessarily legislated that it can't be the same, I really do try to provide the same experience. So I think for us, we feel it on the compliance side. just make sure we're following the correct set of rules. But other than that, I feel like it really does feel like one cohesive department. All of our teams are competing at the highest possible level. And I think we see each other as one. I don't see it as kind of Division I and Division III at all.
Do the students notice it at all, you think? I feel like it's such a huge dynamic there with having those separate schools, but do you really think that there's a difference at all?
So I don't think there's necessarily a divide among our student athletes. But what I think is kind of tangibly obvious to everybody. So case in point, our men's and women's lacrosse teams are housed in a different building, a building that we have that's dedicated to lacrosse. So their locker rooms are not co-located with their Division III peers locker rooms, but they're still using the same weight room. They're still using the same athletic training facility. Division III, obviously the non-traditional season looks a little bit different. So I think it's tangibly obvious that we see lacrosse outside at practice, for example, in their non-championship season. We see them out there for more hours. They're in the weight room, more probably over the course of the year. But other than that, I don't know that aside from the separate facilities that there really is that divide.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to know a little bit of, obviously talk a little bit about how this current situation makes things a little bit up in the air in terms of planning, but are there any
little bit?
Yeah, are there any concrete or even just rough plans of what next season may look like at Johns Hopkins?
Well, I wish there were. So no, I mean, there's certainly nothing concrete. And obviously, like every other institution out there, the first thing we need to understand is sort of institutionally what is best for Johns Hopkins University. So if there are not students on campus, there certainly will not be student athletes on campus. So I think we need institutionally for Johns Hopkins to decide what is going to be best for the university, and decide whether or not students are coming back. And if so, what does that look like? From there, we'll start to sort through the sport pieces. And obviously, we're going to do what the NCAA permits us to do. So if the NCAA comes out and it doesn't permit certain things, we're not going to do those things. But I think to the extent that we have students back, to the extent that we have sort of permission from the NCAA and cooperation, certainly from university leadership and from conference leadership, we're going to try to provide as much of a student athlete experience as we can to our young men and women, with the understanding that we're going to do it safely. So I don't know what that looks like yet. I don't know. I could conjecture 8 million ways, and I think that's a lot of what's happening right now. But I have asked all of my coaches to start thinking about brainstorming. What could this look like? What would be valuable to you? What would be valuable to your student athletes? How could we think about this, just so when we do get a little bit more direction from above, we at least have a sense for which path we think we want to go down. But again, I don't know what that looks like yet. And I think that's the most frustrating part about being a leader right now, is that everybody wants information and I have no information to give, and no real direction to give, other than, common sense will tell me that we need to plan for a number of different scenarios, and then whatever comes our way, we'll be prepared to handle whatever that looks like. And certainly I think we're all hopeful, as everybody is, to have our students back, to have them in a safe environment, and to be able to get on a field or court or in a pool or whatever it looks like, to have some type of experience in that regard. Who knows? Don't know what it looks like.
So obviously it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So I want to kind of ask you first, how are you able to, keep a sound mental health mind right now? And also, what's that mental health aspect look like for students as well? How are you able to kind of facilitate that?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge that everybody's facing right now, if I'm being totally honest. Even those who may feel like on a normal day to day, they don't feel as challenged from a mental health perspective. I think this situation challenges it for everybody, and in different ways. For me personally, I kind of fall back on the things that help me to stay kind of grounded and focused. So case number one, I don't know where she is right now, but I have a dog. Pets are wonderful in that regard. And she is very used now to getting multiple walks a day. So we're outside, we're walking. And even if it's just a little 10-minute walk, I find that it helps me to kind of recharge and recenters me a little bit. I'm also very big into the practice of yoga and meditation, which does wonders for me. So trying to do that. And then obviously, like everyone else, stay connected to the friends and the family and the support network that we have, and make sure that, we're providing support for people, and then we're allowing ourselves to be supported supported in that. I think student athletes, it's no different. So obviously I rely heavily on coaches to stay in contact with their student athletes, and all of our, the student athlete leaders we have, I know, are checking in on one another as well. And I think this is a time when it really needs to be a collaborative effort. We certainly have, as a university, we have all the same infrastructure that we had were the students on campus. So for those who may find it helpful to speak with somebody, we can connect them with those resources. But I think the important thing is that we continually ask the question, how are we doing? And we make it okay that the answer can be like, I'm not doing that great. I'm having a bad day today, right? And I think in this environment, there is no obligation, nor is there ever, but there definitely is no obligation to give the surface answer or to say you're wonderful, because I think all of us at varying points in this have definitely hit points where we're like, what is going on? This is really hard. And it's okay that it's hard. I think the key thing then is to really understand for each of us how it is that we sort of come back and recharge, and that we're not shy about talking to other people about it. So that's certainly what we're encouraging our student athletes to do. I think on the whole, we're pretty good about having those conversations, but we can always be doing more. And I think it's a good time for all of us to really think about what we really need to thrive, particularly in an environment where we may not have some of the kind of the normal comforts that we would have. So to the extent that we can continue to build community and support one another, I think that's how we get through this. And we just sort of have to accept as part of that we don't know how long it's going to be. We don't know what's going to happen. We're all in that boat together. But as long as we have each other, we'll get there wherever we're going together.
Yeah, for sure. So Jen, I'm a dog lover, so I have to know what kind of dog you have. It's just something I got to know.
She is a golden retriever. Let me see. Sailor, come here. Come here. Let's see if we can get her.
Our first dog.
Our canine appearance.
Yes.
She's very bad. Can you see her? She's very bad at getting on camera.
Same with my dog. She hates the camera, so.
Yeah, I'm obviously biased. I think my dog is super cute, and I try to capture like photos and videos of her. And she, as soon as I get the phone up, nope, she stops and she just stares at me. And then yeah. So anyway, she's been a good little companion at home. She's a very lazy coworker. She sleeps all day, but she's just, dogs are the best, right? So,
for sure.
She has no idea what's happening in the world right now. As long as she's getting fed and walked, she is as happy gets. So, good little reminder.
For sure. I love it. So my last question before we get out of here, usually we ask why D3, but I guess we can tweak that answer that question for you right now. So what is it that made you choose Johns Hopkins in particular?
So I really love kind of what Johns Hopkins is about. And it's an interesting question because we're D3 and D1 both, right? So it's not like you're choosing one over the other. But for me, I think just in general, what the institution stands for and is about is the most important thing to me when I think about where I want to be. And by extension, the student athletes are a reflection of whatever that institution is about. So I tell this to recruits. Johns Hopkins is not an easy place to be. It's not the easy choice to make, because choosing Johns Hopkins means you're choosing super high level athletics, whether it's Division I or Division III, but super high level academics. And the two of those things together are not mutually exclusive, but those who choose that experience for themselves are choosing to really commit to something that can be very challenging. And I really love working with student athletes who want that kind of challenge. It reminds me of sort of why I selected the Naval Academy. Though sport was not a driving factor in my selection of that school, it was a lot of what I loved about my undergraduate experience. I love the coaches who work with our student athletes and who want to support them kind of on the academic and the athletic side of things. I just think, and I love the stuff that our institution does. And right now, obviously, Johns Hopkins is in the news a lot because of the incredible work we're doing, on the forefront of research around COVID and on so many other things. It's really special to be part of a place that I believe is changing the world with the research we produce. And then by extension, the students we attract are doing that work. And, our institutional mission is basically knowledge for the world. So it's your responsibility to come in and put this out to the world. I think that knowledge certainly happens in an academic environment, but I also think that athletics is co-curricular. And I think that the experience you have athletically, which is what I get to directly impact, is part of the knowledge you bring to the world. So I love the institution itself. It just so happens that we compete in two different divisions. Doesn't change who we are, what we do, or why we do it.
Definitely. Well, Jen, thank you so much for joining us. We definitely appreciate it. And, try to get some sun today. Try and get a little, try and walk the dog, do whatever you got to do to enjoy this weather for sure. But we definitely appreciate it. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Wish you all the best and hope everyone who may watch this or listen to this is having a great day, staying safe and staying well. So
Absolutely.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
So that does it for another episode of the Inside D3 Show. Thank you guys again for checking in. Stay tuned for more episodes. We drop them every Wednesday on all of our platforms. Also, stay connected on all of our platforms for any stories that might drop during the week as well. And also stay locked in for the Mascot of the Week with Sam V. Rock right after this, and you do not want to miss that. So, once again, I'm Morgan Cheatham. This is the Inside D3 Show, and we are signing off.